Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the marketplace. Coming up, Ghana's economy expands by 7.2% in the third quarter of 2024. More from the government statistician ahead.
Indicates that between the third quarter of 2023 and the third quarter of 2024, Ghana's economy grew by 7.2%. In the case of 2023, that is comparing the third quarter of 2022 and the third quarter of 2023, the economy grew by 2.2%.
Also coming up, hoteliers collaborate with government and other stakeholders to improve the business climate to attract more tourists.
Accra, Ghana has fantastic opportunities. There's a lot of excitement coming up. There's so much demand for Ghana. And we work hand in hand.
Also ahead, we gauge expectations in the tech world following President-elect John Mahama's election victory. We'll talk more about that as he begins the transition process. My name is Darrell Carl. Thanks for joining us. Details coming up. All right, thanks for staying with us, everyone. Ghana's economy grew by 7.2% in the third quarter of 2024, according to provisional figures released by the Ghana Statistical Service. Now, compared to the second quarter of 2024, the economy grew by 6.9%. Now, the services sector continues to be the largest of the Ghanaian economy with a share of 42.9% of GDP at basic prices. This is followed by industry and agriculture, having recorded a growth rate of 32.6% and 24.5% respectively. Here's government statistician Professor Samuel Kobneni.
The growth of 7.2 recorded in the third quarter of 2024 was driven largely by gross capital formulation, as well as also government final consumption expenditure and household final consumption expenditure. Now, when you look at the sectorial estimate, the industry sector had or experienced some form of growth, whilst the services sector saw some decline in growth.
From an oil GDP perspective, with a value of 48.2 billion Ghana cedis for the third quarter of 2024 relative to 45.0 billion Ghana cedis, overall growth rate in GDP in the third quarter of 2024 stood at 7.2%. This indicates that between the third quarter of 2023 and the third quarter of 2024, Ghana's economy grew by 7.2%. In the case of 2023, that is comparing the third quarter of 2022 and the third quarter of 2023, the economy grew by 2.2%. So over these two time periods, that is between the third quarter of 2022 and the third quarter of 2023, which the economy grew by 2.2%, and the third quarter of 2023 and the third quarter of 2024, when the economy grew by 7.2%, we've seen a 5.0 percentage point difference between the year-on-year growth rate between 2022 and 2023 relative to 2023 and 2024.
Within the agricultural sub-sector, crops expanded the most, whilst fishing contracted the most. Now, when you move to that of the industry sector, mining and quarrying also expanded the most within that space, whilst water and sewages also contracted the most, same as the services sector, which also had information and communication services also expanding the most, looking at the current data from the Ghana Statistical Service.
The industry sector is contributing at about a third, specifically 32.6%, and the agricultural sector contributing about a quarter, specifically 24.5%, indicating that GDP oil estimate in current terms for the third quarter of 2024 stood at 270 billion Ghana cedis.
Mining, crops, and also information and communication services actually drove the GDP for the third quarter of 2024. For Joy Business, James Ishen.
All right, thanks, James. I want to connect now with Professor Patrick Sumin, who is an economist, for an appreciation of the latest numbers from the Ghana Statistical Service. Good afternoon to you. What do you think of these latest figures released by the Ghana Statistical Service? How significant is this growth?
Good afternoon, and good afternoon to viewers, and thanks for having me. So I think, it almost looks like a mirror image of the growth we saw in the second quarter. In terms of how many sectors grew, how many sectors contracted, it looked like the same sectors that drove the growth rate are the same sectors that drew the growth rate this time. So it's led by mining and quarrying, ICT, construction, and to some extent crops. So I think overall, when you take the big picture number, it looks good. That 7.2% is the highest quarter-on-quarter growth you've seen for more than 5 years. I think when you look into the details, though, I think you begin to see some sectors are really struggling. Even though crop sector, for instance, saw a 5.9% growth, I think, but cocoa contracted again. Note that in the first quarter, cocoa contracted by 20.2%. In the second quarter, it contracted by 26% or so. And this quarter again, cocoa has contracted again. So I think, and also when you look at the sources of the growth, it's not really as broad-based as expected. So you see, it's the same, like I mentioned, the same sectors: mining and quarrying, ICT, and then construction. Part of it you can especially for construction, you can see we are in election year, so the number of road construction projects seem to have picked up. But the mining and quarrying, new major mining companies have come on stream, especially in the northern part of the country. So that seems to be what is driving the growth. I think when you look at the sources of growth, it tells you that where majority of Ghanaians are involved, the sectors that majority of Ghanaians get their living from are not doing so great. So I think while the overall number is looking big and is looking quite strong, when you begin to disaggregate, look at the details, then you begin to see there are some sectors that are still not doing well. Water and sewage, for instance, is contracted, which is a problem. So if you look at water and sewage and cocoa production, and you just oppose with the mining, we've seen what mining is doing to some sectors of the economy.
Yeah, how problematic is this? I mean, you talk about the agri sector. I'm sure that's where you're referring to, where majority of Ghanaians get their livelihoods from. The fact that they are not we are not making so much from that sector. How is that a problem, and how do we fix it, really?
I think it's very problematic. So, Darrell, after the second quarter number was released, and the headline growth number looks so impressive, but many Ghanaians will tell you have no idea what's going on here, because many Ghanaians will tell you they don't feel it in their pocket. And one of the reasons is that agri has really struggled, in particular crop sector. And I'm sure in the lead up to this period, we've seen food prices continue to rise. So I think when sectors like that are not doing great, it really affects it affects so many Ghanaians. So, and I think that's what we have to pay attention to. Agri still need a lot of investment, especially food production. It has really struggled in the last couple of years. So I think a lot more investment is needed to expand our production base. And that way it will help us to rein in the rising cost of food that we've been seeing, especially in the last couple of years.
I mean, this morning we're reporting that there could be some food shortage going into the future because, again, farmers are complaining that policies are really not working towards solving the kinds of problems we saw during this year. That is a big problem. And so, I mean, it's a challenge for the incoming government as well. In terms of policy, you talk about investments in the agri sector. Is there any concrete policy that works at this point?
Well, I think what we've seen in time past and some of the challenges with the agri programs that the current government has had, there's a lot. The planting for food and jobs, in some sense, became an agri subsidy program.
We don't know what's going to happen to it after next year. Just saying.
So the agri sector has struggled because the PFJ in essence became a fertilizer distribution program that was beset by a lot of problems, and also we still, even though the fertilizer distribution was a big part, we still decided to focus on importing the fertilizer. So whenever the supply chain lines were blocked, and then the program began to struggle. I think the idea that our agriculture is still really dependent is a problem, and that has to be solved. But it's not just solving the input supply problems. So it's also solving the distribution issues so that we cut the post-harvest losses. There are even cases where production has done well, we realize that we struggle to distribute them, and then post-harvest losses are a major problem in this country. So when we talk about investment in agriculture, yes, we need to improve the inputs and the production, but we also need to improve the distribution. So, you saw cases where people said, oh, there's food in the farm gate, but they were forced to bring food to the Ministry of Agri premises, which obviously isn't sustainable. That tells you that there's a problem. But the current problem we are facing is not just a matter of distribution. Production is not doing well. Over the last couple of years, the subsidies that were boosting the production have struggled. So I think that is something that we need to pay more attention to, ensuring that, especially commercial farming, whether it's more government support to ensure that we are producing at wide scale, but also when we produce, we are also finding more effective ways to have more cold chain system, and it goes all the way to even road construction and finding alternative ways of supplying food into the main market centers.
Yeah, I speak of production struggles. You talked about cocoa. Just yesterday, we're reporting as well that prices have shot up above 10,000, and you think that, well, this is the time to make much more money from cocoa, but it doesn't appear that is the case because, again, we are facing challenges with production. I want to ask you about industry because you also say, well, the sort of uptick we saw in the mining and quarrying subsectors was because of election construction activities. I mean, things were supposed to be commissioned and all of that. Also, you made the point about the fact that this growth that we've seen doesn't affect everybody, it's just a sector. And so is this, I guess the question I want to ask is, I mean, how impactful is this and how sustainable is this growth we are seeing in industry? Seeing that industry has struggled in previous times.
So I think let's explain. The industry has about 5 subsectors. Mining and quarrying is the one that has been doing really well. And then, of course, construction has also done well. Those 2 subsectors in industry have done well. But otherwise, electricity, well, now it appears to be recovering. In previous years, electricity has seen a contraction. Now it's recovering a little bit. But I think one of the main problems we've had is not being able to ensure that, especially mining, is connected to other sectors of the economy, building stronger linkages. So the mining industry is still like an enclave. We are not making sure that we are doing enough processing of the minerals, And so when mining is doing well, you don't see it dragging other subsectors of the economy along. And I think that's where the problem is. So, and also, with the exception of few small-scale mining, I mean, the major mining output comes from the big firms. And then you have to ask, what is the extent of Ghanaian participation in that sector? It's relatively little. It's only the small-scale, artisanal and small-scale mining sector. But their output is relatively low. So even if you say mining sector is doing well, if you got the bigger disaggregation, you realize that it's probably because, like I said, we've seen new major mines open, especially in Upper East and other parts of northern Ghana. That's really what is driving the growth. So obviously, its connection to ordinary Ghanaians is relatively limited.
Well, if you're assuming office in January and you're looking at these figures, what would be the advice to the president-elect?
There's still a lot of work to do. I think we shouldn't focus too much on the headline number and think that our problems are solved. Our problems are not solved. There are still major problems. Like we've already discussed the fact that we need to do more with agriculture. And then also we need to find ways to ensure that the sectors that are performing well are interconnected. There's stronger linkages between the formal and the informal sector, that when mining is doing well, mining support services are doing well. I think there's still a lot of work to do. We shouldn't say that because growth rate is somewhat exceeding expectation, the entire Ghanaians are feeling that much. We have to ensure that the growth is more broad-based. You've already heard that energy sector still has problems, even though these particular release don't show up, because I think we've seen electricity growing by about 3% or so. But we all know that the problems are underneath. It appears that we've done some things to paper over the cracks, because obviously this is an election year. Now it's time to knuckle down and solve the real problems. The reason why, especially the informal sector, the SME sector is struggling is because, they cannot afford to generate their own electricity the way big mines can afford. So the energy sector issues have to be addressed. And then agri sector also have to get a lot of attention.
Wow. Thank you so much for your perspective. We are growing, yes, it's good, but it has to be broad-based. It has to be linked to other sectors as well so that everybody feels the impact of the growth. Thank you so much. Professor Patrick Isuming, economist, joined us with his thoughts. Appreciate it. You're watching The Marketplace. Now, the Ghana cedi could be one of the biggest beneficiaries as a result of the smooth general elections. Here's more in this report.
This is based on earlier reports and even the Bank of Ghana, which had argued that fears about the outcome of the elections had played a role in the cedi's depreciation earlier this year. This is because there were concerns about whether this election will be that smooth and even concerns about transfer of power going forward. However, events over the past 3 days have dealt with this challenge. This could result in the cedi's gains sustained going forward. It has also given some assurance to investors and the donor partners about the maturity of Ghana's democracy, and therefore there is no need to panic. It has also given some assurance to investors and the donor partners about the maturity of Ghana's democracy, and therefore there is no need for these investors to panic. Joint business engagement with some of these investors indicate that Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia move to concede defeat has also been very helpful. A lot will be watching the foreign exchange space as well as the Ghana cedi to see whether these gains will be consolidated going forward.
Now, hotels in the country have been collaborating with the government and other stakeholders to improve the business climate to attract more tourists. Now, this is aimed at making the country gain more from its potential as a tourism hub. General Manager for Kempinski Gold Coast Hotel, Hanno Bakov, discloses to Joy Business after celebrating a Christmas tree lighting ceremony in Accra. Here's more.
Although Ghana's hotel business has seen a significant boost due to the tourism potential of the country, many businesses see more opportunity to explore as the economy expands. According to the General Manager for Kempinski, Hanno Bakov, industry players will continue to engage government and stakeholders to make the sector more flexible for growth. He has been speaking with journalists during a tree lighting event by the hotel.
We're working very closely with the authorities, we're working very closely with the ministries. and we support each other. Not only us, also our colleagues in the other hotels. I think Accra, Ghana has fantastic opportunities. There's a lot of excitement coming up. There's so much demand for Ghana. Yeah, and we work hand in hand.
The tree lighting event by the Kempinski Gold Coast Hotel also marks the beginning of its 10th anniversary. Chief of Protocol at the Office of the Government Chair, Ambassador Sylvester Parker Alote, praised the hotel for its contribution to the beautification of Accra as a capital city.
To celebrate a decade of excellence by Kempinski Hotel Gold Coast City, congratulations to the entire team for 10 incredible years of raising the standard of hospitality industry in Ghana. The dedication of your staff to service to the community through various social corporate responsibilities which they have undertaken, and innovation which the hotel has put in place, including the tree lighting ceremony each year, have all made lasting mark on our capital city and our country.
Some patrons were entertained at the event to usher the general public into the Yuletide.
All right, you're watching The Marketplace. We are back after this short break. All right, let's talk tech. A quick chat will lead for Eyes of Africa, Henry Kobler. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us, Henry. We want to talk about the outcome of the 2024 elections. You know, before the elections started, we were talking about the potential impact of social media. How do you think that played out with the outcome of the elections?
Thank you very much, Daryl. So, I mean, Daryl, if you looked at the U.S. elections, you would have realized that I could basically mention that Elon had played a very huge task.
Oopsie.
Place. Social media had a very huge place in controlling the elections, sort of in Ghana here. And again, for me, it's one of the things that I think that the growing populace and the politicians relatively should be looking at. I realized quite a lot of people were influencing the elections through TikTok, especially, and Twitter, which had been one of the most used platforms in this particular election.
How exactly were they doing so?
I mean, there were quite a lot of influencers pushing in most of these policies from the political parties, especially for the NDC party, I could mention, because I'd seen quite a lot of influencers relatively tilting in that direction. And again, for me, I realized that could play a lot of play in the winning of the elections. Again, I could tell you that generally we've seen most of the demonstrations that had happened in the country relatively been having a lot of top parties on Twitter And again, you have most of these elite young youth relatively sitting on these platforms, also taking some level of actions in these elections. And so I had a lot of influencers pushing in. I could also tell you that there were a lot of bot activities and fake tweets that were being used in terms of generative AI on social media. But again, that relatively was coming in as a strategy for any of the political parties. But I could tell you that Twitter had, TikTok had much of the influence, again, really because you can put a face to the campaigns that were happening. And so we almost loved influencers were sort of pushing the agenda of the political parties on there. So you could put a face to the policies, and with some level of fun and enthusiasm coming in there, it relatively made a place on there.
Yeah, and we've got more young people on social media. So if you wanted votes from young people, that was the place to go. Just 15 seconds. So do you think that more people were consuming their news from social media than on traditional media?
I mean, all of the kind of news that you would want to be consuming, inclusive of the policies of these political parties, were sort of made very clear. Their main tags were very pushed on these social media platforms. And so for me, it was a very big one for political parties to have made advantages. You wouldn't have realized that SMS and WhatsApp messages had gone down in this particular elections, but social media was doing a very good job on there.
All right, Henry Kobler, good to see you once again. There is more news on our website, myjoyonline.com/business. More on the GDP estimates we've been reporting this afternoon for you, myjoyonline.com/business. Thanks for watching.